one. All right. Hello and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world tuning in. This is another episode of Design Future Live, a program of AIGA, the Professional Association for Design. My name is Lishan Huang, Director of Design Content and Learning here at AIGA. And if this is your first time tuning into the show, this is a live show that we syndicate out and stream to the AIGA Design LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook pages. You can also watch this on demand. So hello if you're watching this recording at some point in the future. And this will also be available on our podcast, wherever you get podcasts at AIGA Design. You can search for that on the platform of your choice. A little bit about the format. We have a special guest today, and I'll introduce her briefly, but just a brief pause to say that we have a code of conduct here at AIGA for this and all of our other live and online events. Basically, keep it full of your curiosity and kindness and keep it free from harassment and abuse, and we'll be A-OK. And I also need to remind you that what we're talking about today is with a lawyer, a trained professional, but this is not constituted as any legal or financial advice. So do consult with your own lawyer and figure that out as we need to. But this is a great basis to just learn about the broad topics that we have going on today. So without further ado, I will introduce our special guest today, who is an IP and digital assets attorney and advisor to companies and brands. She works with NFTs, with the multiverse, with DAOs, crypto, Web3, and blockchain. It's okay if you don't know what all of those terms mean. You might have heard about them a little bit in the news and what you've been reading about. We'll cover some of these terms as we go along. So whatever your level or experience with this, hopefully you'll stick around and listen to our show. JoAnn Holmes is the name of our guest today, JoAnn Holmes Esquire. She goes by Jo, who will also be doing a workshop next week at the AIGA Design and Business Conference. That's May 4th through 6th online. Jo will be doing a workshop on intellectual property and Web 3.0. So we'll go deeper in some of these topics and we'll post a link to that as well. But in the meantime, let's welcome Jo, and feel free to post your questions at any time. I'll be monitoring the chat there. We'd love to bring in your audience questions as we go along. But Jo, welcome to the show.
LaShawn, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I am that digital assets geek. I love all things Web3, and so it's so fun to get to speak to the creative community.
Sure thing. Yeah, it's great to have you. And to be fully honest, I'm still learning a lot about what these terms mean. So hopefully we can define them a little bit, especially for the folks who are still figuring this stuff out. But as the first question, on your website, holmesatlaw.com, you say that you help brands and creators develop smart Web3 strategy, monetize IP, and negotiate successful deals. And we can go into some examples of what that means. But what really stuck out to me was that you also highlighted it doesn't hurt to have some fun too. And so I'd love to hear about how this stuff is fun for you. Where do you see the fun in all of these emerging tech trends and opportunities?
That's a great question. So, I've been an intellectual property attorney managing assets on a global basis in about 140 countries for decades. And so, I come at this from a perspective of having had the honor of working with brands and creators and innovators for over 20 years. And I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly challenged by the new ways that they think about things and trying to apply the law to support their goals and objectives. I get to work with really fun projects from NFT creators, entrepreneurs building businesses in Web3, innovators finding that coupling between the digital and the physical, and the reality that the law moves much slower than tech and innovation. But the excitement of this space for me in many ways is bringing Web3 to a broader global audience of people who might not have had access to financial tools or marketplaces before to showcase their talent, and really creating a space where we can be inclusive and diverse and create new opportunities. So the innovation, the ideas that I get to talk to creators around, it keeps me on my toes, and I'm having fun seeing the ways that people in Web3 are upsetting the paradigm. And it's no single model. It's very young people to more mature people, and just frankly, a lot of smart people coming to the space and sharing new ideas.
That's awesome. I'd love to learn more about some examples of some of the folks that you've worked with, but maybe we can start with what the existing paradigm is, or what the existing dominant paradigm is that's maybe going away or being challenged at least by this NFT stuff. So for me, when you say the existing paradigm, I hear maybe the traditional gallery system with gatekeepers primarily in New York, and different festivals that we hear about like the Venice Biennale or Art Basel, Miami, these sort of very specific but also really narrowly defined places where people go and kind of make it as artists to sell their pieces. And it sounds like with NFTs and some of the stuff going on, there's more of a decentralization of who can access audiences and sell their art. Is that kind of where you're talking about in terms of upsetting some of these older paradigms?
Absolutely. I mean, there are financial paradigms and there are gatekeepers. So, from a financial perspective, here in the United States, where you and I are based, as well as globally, there's a significant component of people who are unbanked, who
Mm.
don't have access to checking accounts or saving accounts or the stock market that we here as Americans typically have access to. What that means is there have not been ways for them to transfer financial value in exchange for their creativity, in exchange for their artwork. Because cryptocurrency is a platform that, in some ways, removes some of the financial gatekeepers, that means that people who have internet access all over the world can buy cryptocurrency, have their own wallets, access global marketplaces, and be able to display their art. And that creates new opportunities, to your point. Whereas if you have an outstanding talent and you build a community, that community can become your marketing team and can tout the value of your talent and can also participate in the wealth accretion from seeing your talent at the earliest stages and the value of your artwork increasing. I think it might be helpful for those who might not have the foundation around what is an NFT to
Yeah,
just take a moment and, and share
let's do
that
that for
definition.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so an NFT is it's really two things. On the one side, from a digital perspective, it's a deed of ownership or a certificate of authenticity that's housed on a blockchain. And what is a blockchain? It's just open source software. There are different blockchains. There's the Ethereum blockchain, Solana, Near, Avalanche. There are different blockchains, but effectively, again, they're open source software. And so a non-fungible token, that token piece is a representation, again, a deed of ownership and authenticity on a blockchain. That token can be connected to digital and physical assets. So, in the conversation that we're having right now, we're talking about taking that token and aligning to digital art. And so, what that does is it creates a way in using the blockchain technology to authenticate that this is a real piece of digital art that came from a specific creator. What Web 2 did was we kind of had that right click save where you could go online and you could immediately have a digital copy. And that took away frankly, the financial value of artists. And so, what Web3 does is it creates that provenance. If you were to try to authenticate the Mona Lisa example, there would be professionals in the art world who would be able to speak to this is the chain of title of this piece of art and authenticate that it is the actual Mona Lisa. What the blockchain does in Web3 is that authentication piece. It makes it technological. And so those who want to support an artist or a creator are able to look through the blockchain and confirm that this is an actual piece of authenticated that came from that creator who you want to support. And that gives value back to the creator, and it gives a trust in the community that they are actually supporting the creator. One exciting thing about this is the concept of digital royalties in Web3, which allows creators to be able to not only have value in that first sale, but through maintaining sales on a marketplace, be able to have recurring as well. So it's creating some exciting new opportunities for artists to be able to have ongoing value in their work and for communities to participate in the financial appreciation of an artist's work as well.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to highlight a little bit some of what you were talking about, the secondary royalties, because I think that's one of the issues that happens a lot in traditional art markets, right? You could be just choose any painter, maybe from the 20th century. Often it's not until later in their lives, sometimes after they die, that their artwork sells for significant amounts of money, right? So maybe they sold their painting for $1,000, but then it goes to auction. Late in their life or after they've died, and it goes for millions of dollars, and the artists and their estates don't really see any of that if it's a secondary sale, right? It's like the person who bought it for $1,000 is selling it for $1 million. And so you're saying that with some of these NFTs and these contracts on the blockchain, it's possible for artists to get a cut of these like sales down the line.
Absolutely. That's right. And we are still very early in this technology, especially when it comes to NFTs and distribution to communities. There are a variety of different marketplaces. The marketplaces have different technological functions within their coding structure. And
Mhm.
so there are different protocols that will allow for NFTs to have smart contracts, which again is just code, and that code can embed a secondary royalty to the original creator. There are some issues if you're based here in the United States with the Securities and Exchange Commission around royalties outside of those attributed to the original creator. So there are some concepts around fractionalization of art, for example. So if you have an expensive piece of digital art, there is a concept of fractionalization that could allow several owners to participate in ownership of one piece of digital art. The Securities and Exchange Commission has said that they're taking a close look at that, and they've cued to us that they perceive that to be a security that would need to be registered and be appropriately aligned to the regulatory regime of the SEC. But
Right.
that sort of safe harbor, if you will, still exists with an original creator if that NFT continues to be bought and sold on market, recognize those secondary royalties, and again, that's a question of coding, then there is an opportunity for those artists to continue to receive royalties on resales. So what I would say to folks who are thinking about royalties and secondary sales is take some time to educate yourself on the marketplaces that are going to offer that. If sales are happening peer to peer through private wallets, then that secondary sales royalty is going to drop off. And one of the reasons for that is think about, if I own an NFT and I want to gift it to you, then I may not want to have to add in a secondary layer of sale or royalty back to the creator. Or I could have several digital wallets of my own. And if I'm transferring it from one of my digital wallets to another, then it wouldn't necessarily make sense for me to pay a royalty on a transfer of my personal wallets. So it is still nascent in terms of the technology development, but the opportunities there are very promising for creators.
That's awesome. Thank you for that short answer, the preview. I wanted to do a quick reset for folks who are just joining us on the live stream. I am here live with JoAnn Holmes. Jo is an IP and digital assets attorney and advisor to companies and brands and issues like NFTs, the metaverse, DAOs, crypto, Web3, and blockchain. Also wanted to acknowledge some of our audience members. Antara was saying really valuable points. Thank you for spreading knowledge on this important subject. Sarah was saying, very glad to have information on this. Many artists always short sell themselves. Let's change that. And I think one part of that is working with a lawyer who can help you navigate this. And we also have Martin, who has our first audience question. Martin wants to know, what is the process for a creator to add a token to their art, and how do they track usage? I know that's a very big and general question, but how can we approach that now?
Yeah, this gets the guise of the SEC. Unfortunately, right now, from a regulatory perspective, there's a lot of gray space around tokenization. One of the areas where there's a natural synergy is thinking about, for example, NFTs, building community, and DAOs. So NFTs are sometimes used for fundraising purposes to sell a collection so that a creator can support a certain objective with a community that might be organized as a DAO. You sell what's popular right now is a 10,000 piece collection of digital art, and some component of that goes into a DAO treasury to be able to support a charitable objective or something else that the community believes in and wants to support. So there was a time frame in our still relatively young Web3 ecosystem where there was a lot of token issuance, and that got quite a bit of scrutiny again from the Securities and Exchange Commission. What tokens look like now that tend to be on the safer side of things, and again, this is something that will require a close evaluation from a securities and fundraising attorney, but what looks like a safer ground is a token that, for example, allows DAO community members to participate in governance of that DAO associated with the creator's NFTs that gives social benefits. So for example, you might be able to, if you were an NFT holder or a DAO token holder, be able to have access to certain rooms within a Discord or certain live events. There might also be benefits. And so maybe you get access to be able to buy products or services by virtue of being a holder. When that token starts to have a financial value, and particularly if the leaders of a DAO or the creator of an NFT start to speak to past or future financial success associated with a project, again, that starts to get into some murky space in terms of whether the SEC is going to have a focus around that. So again, to try to give some guidance around a token, if the token is focused around governance, social benefit, or access to community benefits, that or products or services, all of those are closer to the safer side of things. That is not a blanket statement that that's always going to give you cover from the SEC, because especially when there starts to be a market for those tokens, we're still again in that gray area. But NFTs are definitely used for fundraising purposes associated with DAOs, and DAO members can absolutely participate in governance of that organization and certain objectives that the organization supporting an artist might want to achieve.
Right. So just to sum up a little bit of what I've heard so far, an NFT can act as like a deed of ownership of something. It can validate the authenticity of that asset that you own, but you're saying that it can also be like a key or like a badge at a conference, right? Of like it gives you access to the VIP space, or it like gets you access to the lounge kind of thing. You've also mentioned DAOs, and I want to make sure everyone's on the same page there. So DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and from my understanding, it's sort of like a co-op, right? Where different people have different abilities to make decisions and vote on things that are both the rules as well as the code for how this operates online. Can you tell us more about DAOs for folks who are new to this term?
Sure. So DAOs are a great opportunity for groups of people to come together around a given purpose. Sometimes that might be a social DAO or a DAO for a particular purpose of supporting a creator. Sometimes it might be for an investing purpose. Sometimes it might be for a grant purpose to try to build out an ecosystem on a blockchain, for example. For charitable purposes, for product or service offering purposes. There are any number of reasons why a DAO might come together. And there's been an evolution in the DAO space. So, it's hard to say old school when a lot of us have been in this space for, just a couple of years. You're an old OG if you've been around for more than 2 years in this space. But one of the things that I would say is that the earlier concept of a DAO, as you spoke to, LaShawn, is a decentralized autonomous organization. So that means there's not a traditional corporate structure where there's a hierarchy of leadership, that it's kind of smart contract driven, where you set the code to be able to govern aspects of the organization. And that's the autonomous piece of it. So the decentralized piece is membership based, that's not hierarchical, and that membership could be global. The autonomous is smart contract and code driven management of the organization. So that's the earlier side of the evolution of DAOs is less decentralized and less autonomous and more flexible and member driven. And so, what does that look like? That looks like the reality is that typically you need a nucleus of leaders who are going to drive the mission of an organization, to establish it, to help educate people about the goals. So you have a core group of members who oftentimes now in DAOs are those who are driving it to try to get it to a point where it can be decentralized and member managed. It's also not necessarily smart contract driven. There are opportunities for members to vote. And just like in a traditional corporation, the reality is people have a lot of things going on. So you might be a
Right.
shareholder in Apple, but do you really take the opportunity to vote on those things that are put before the shareholder of Apple Corporation? A lot of those shareholders don't vote. And so we're seeing some of those same things in DAOs, where what's happening is that pods or guilds are being separated out so that people who have subject matter expertise in a what would be a department in a company have the opportunity to be able to move forward objectives within a DAO and still vote. And some of that voting is happening in a Web 2 setting so that you don't have transaction fees to worry about it. And some of the more significant components are voted on with a blockchain confirmation. So DAOs are very early stage rethinking of traditional corporations for any number of social, financial, public good focused objectives. And there is very much a legal overlay to all of that. Our governments are thinking about taxation, they're thinking about employment law. There are aspects around fiduciary duties. If your DAO doesn't have a company like LLC or corporate wrapper or some sort of non-US based kind of entity representation, then you fall back to a general partnership, which means all the DAO members, the treasury managers, the leadership of the DAO could have personal liability. That means your house and your car and your bank account could be at risk. So there are a number of legal issues impacting DAOs, just like there are legal issues largely from a trademark, copyright, and contract perspective that impact NFTs, which is one of the reasons why it's a good idea to have a relationship with an attorney to help guide you through some of those things. And for me, as an attorney, it's really a balancing act between making sure that people have good information around how the law acts, but not stifling that innovation.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point about working with an attorney for this. At what point should somebody start building that relationship and reaching out to an attorney if they're a creator and they're ready to put themselves out there, or they're ready to join a DAO or one of these Discord communities where there are creators involved and they want to invest? Like on either side of that, the creator side or the investor side, like what point should somebody really think about, okay, before I do anything big, let me talk to a lawyer?
So, from an investor side, I mean, maybe it would be helpful to step back once again and just
Sure.
kind of give a tentpole understanding of what is Web3. I see it as five things. So, you've got cryptocurrency, which is the monetary layer. Of what causes blockchains to be able to move. When someone sells an NFT and someone buys an NFT, there's a transaction happening there. Just like if you go in store and you buy a loaf of bread, there's a transaction happening there. The currency that supports that is, excuse me, going to be ETH or SOL or Bitcoin. It's going to be, or stable coins, which are the cryptocurrency equivalent of fiat, like a US dollar or a euro. So there's a real baseline understanding of cryptocurrency, which to facilitate transactions in Web3, cryptocurrency is that monetary unit that we're using. So that's the first tent pole is cryptocurrency. The second is DeFi, or decentralized finance. Just like you can put up collateral to get a loan, or you can get a CD, or have a savings account that's going to yield money from it. We have a whole financial ecosystem in Web3 that is called DeFi. And so that's the second tentpole. A third tentpole is NFTs, again, non-fungible tokens. And there's that, again, there's that token side, which is a representation of ownership on the blockchain that's attached to a digital or physical asset. That's number three. Number four is DAOs, which we started talking about. And there's a real synergy between NFTs and DAOs. And the reason being because NFTs, especially if you have a collection, really ends up being building out of a community. And the way that communities presented in Web3 is through DAOs. And then the fifth and final tentpole is the metaverse, which is, oh gosh, lots of people define this in different ways, but the metaverse in many ways is right now a meshing of Web 2 and Web 3. From a Web 2 perspective, it might look like Roblox or Minecraft, where you're building digital worlds. In Web 3, it might look like Decentraland or the Sandbox, or Axie Infinity, or any number of gaming opportunities where you are using the blockchain to be able to build out virtual worlds and realities with NFTs as assets within those worlds. So a key way that we would, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we dropped you for
good.
a sec, but you're back.
Good. I'm glad. So a key way that you would distinguish Web3 gaming and the metaverse, for example, is that those skins and in-game assets that you might have in World of Warcraft or other web gaming, where if you walk away from the game, you effectively walk away from the asset that you've built up. In Web3, those assets can be interoperable. We're moving towards an opportunity for those assets to go from one game to another, and for you to be able to sell those assets and maintain that value in a way that you couldn't in Web 2 gaming. And so those are the 5 tent poles, if you will, from my perspective of Web. And when we think about the ways that creators can participate in this space, I mean, the opportunities are really endless in terms of gaming, in terms of helping brands think through how they can have a meaningful space, in terms of creating assets that you can maintain some, again, going back to royalty, some facet of ownership around. So I wanted to step back and give that perspective, and I will ask you to remind me of what your question was, Sean, because I got so excited talking about that I think I forgot.
I think it's so multifaceted. So there's so many tent poles, but maybe we can pick a tent pole and say, like, if you want to get into the NFT space, at what point should you consider working with a lawyer?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So for NFTs, it's really helpful, I think, to consider what you want to offer in terms of your talent and in terms of your community. So there's a concept of road mapping and white paper, where at the very earliest stages, you're thinking through what will the journey of the experience for my community look like. So that might look like you as a creator putting out one-of-one works, where it's not a collection, they are bespoke, discrete units of your work, right? And that's perfectly fine and within the guise of your right as an artist. You might instead say, I want to have a collection. And so if you want to have a collection, then the question becomes, what do you want the relationship to your community of those collectors to look like? If we use some of the popular examples, Boss Babes or World of Women or Women Rise, right? Those are 10,000 piece collections where you're really building out a community. And that community is going to come to expect is, what does our intellectual property and commercialization rights look like? So each of those that I named, World of Women, Boss Babes, Women Rise, those are brands. Just like Disney is a brand, just Ape Yacht Club or CryptoPunks have come to be acknowledged as very meaningful brands. So you want to think about working with an attorney to be mindful of whether stepping on someone else's toes, that's called trademark clearance, and then affirmatively thinking about how do you get protection with, let's say, for example, the US Trademark Office for your brand name, so that you can lock up the ownership rights in that asset, right? And brand is one piece of IP that you might want to retain ownership around. The second piece is copyright. And so in the United States, to register a copyright for a creative work costs less than $100. And what that gives you as a creator is the right to be able to sue for infringement, get reimbursement of your attorney's fees if someone has infringed your work. And then you also want to think from a contract perspective, what set of rights do I want to give? So what's really exciting and fun to me as an intellectual property attorney who helps my clients monetize their assets, including their digital assets, is historically we had the Disney model of centralized ownership and control. Everything was locked up and managed, and you were really putting yourself in jeopardy even to create fan art without their permission. We've really got a spectrum now from the Disney model to the CryptoKitties example that came into notoriety in the 2017-2018 range, where Dapper Labs really started a new, more generous perspective where you could take the CryptoKitty you bought and go put it on merchandise and sell that up to $100,000. And you didn't owe Dapper Labs anything for you taking your NFT and commercializing it. Then we moved further down the spectrum to sort of the World of Women or Bored Ape Yacht Club example, where there's an even broader right to commercialize if you're an NFT owner, where there's no commercial cap on it, right? And then you've got the farthest end of the spectrum with a project like Nouns, where it's Creative Commons Zero. And those who purchase that artwork, they're not subject to a license that could be revoked. They are free to go out and do whatever they'd like to do with that. But keep in mind, we've got three types of law. We've got the trademark for the brand name, again, like Bored Ape Yacht Club. We've got the copyright in the presentation of the creative work. And then we've got the contract or license that tells the buyers what they can do with what they bought. And in the absence of that license, you as an NFT buyer only have the right to privately display that artwork, basically in your home, and to resell it. Answer your question around when does it make sense to get an attorney involved? It's when you're thinking about what rights do you want to retain as a creator and what rights do you want to share and what kind of community are you trying to build? Because again, that community can be your marketing team, but they tend to want to have an ownership stake in that work, and finding that balance is worth speaking to an attorney.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So now we're at the time for our final question. To let the audience know, again, Jo is doing a workshop next week on intellectual property and Web 3.0 at the AIGA Design and Business Conference. That's May 4th through 6th. That's online and will be recorded as well. So that's Wednesday through Friday next week. And that's a longer thing. It's like 2 hours, so almost 3 hours. So we can go much further in depth for that, but maybe just as the final question, can you tease a little bit of some of the things that we'll talk about, and then just also let folks know where they can find you online, and we'll take it out from there.
Absolutely, thank you. So what we're going to talk about and focus on next week is really going to be NFTs for the creative community. I have advised clients literally from the startup stage all the way through multi-billion-dollar organizations. And so I really want to first help people understand how to protect themselves from a legal perspective, go in around what is an NFT, how would you go about minting one, the types of legal issues that are going to impact. We will talk a little bit, although the focus will not be around DAOs or the metaverse, but what I love to do is have collaborative conversations. And so for anyone who joins next week, I would invite you and encourage you to come with your questions, come with your real world examples. I won't be able to give legal advice, but I will be able to help you think through the ways that I imagine these issues, the ways that I anticipate the law will impact projects. And I love to have real-time interaction. So I encourage anyone who has an interest in this space to come with your questions and let's work it through next week.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there co-hosting it as well with Jo to facilitate your questions next week. So looking forward to seeing folks at the AIGA Design and Business Conference. And that was it for today.
I forgot to tell people how to reach me, LaShawn. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yes. No worries. Sorry, yes. I just kept going. Where can folks find you online?
I apologize for that. Here on LinkedIn is a great place to connect. I'm active on LinkedIn, less active, but somewhat so on Twitter. Holmes at Law is my handle there. And the website is Holmes, HOLMESATLAW. So please connect with me. I love to talk to folks about projects, and I'm happy to make connections.
Awesome. Holmes Outlaw, JoAnn Holmes, thank you so much again. And looking forward to next week and see everybody else next week or on the next episode of Design Future Live. See you later.
Thanks, everyone.